let's take a look at some of the assets and liabilities of these choices. A national marketing company. Okay, national marketing company is somebody that operates in 40 states or more for the purposes of our discussion here. So these are companies that have an operation where they have salespeople who cover 3 or 5 or 8 states, and they will manage your brand in all of those states. Okay. The liabilities that I've put up here, a potential multi-year contract. Now, this means you may be asked to sign a contract with this marketing company for 2 or 3 or 5 years. Okay, you're dealing with a large organization, and you have to be prepared to do that. You have to understand that there's a possibility that your brand will be diluted among many of the other wines that are in that marketing company's universe. Okay, the assets are a potential multi-year contract. Hey, they're going to buy my wine for 5 years. I don't have to think about it. My business plan says 3,000, 5,000, 8,000, 10,000, and they're going to buy it all. So I'm not worried about it. It's under, you've got a contract. Guaranteed shipments. The national marketing company is going to make sure that your wine is moving through the system. That's part of what they do. And a large sales force on the street. So I mean, there are definitely pros to having a national marketing company. Some of the national marketing companies you may know, co-brand. Okay, Vineyard Brands, Wilson Daniels, Terlato, I think Northwest Core, they're up here. V2 Marketing. These are companies who handle 40 or more states, and they will get your brand into distribution if you have enough wine in that many states. Okay, a regional marketing company. Now, regional marketing companies, I would peg at companies who operate in 25 states or less. There's usually no contract, 30 days notice. Sometimes there could be a contract, but basically if one of either of you are unhappy, you can terminate the agreement with 30 days notice. You may need to deal with several regional companies. You may need one in the Northwest or the Northeast, one in the Southwest, one in the Gulf states. So you may have to deal with a couple of marketing companies that are regionally based. And you're limiting yourself to a certain number of states. If a marketing company operates in 12 states, those are the 12 states they'll handle your brand for. You'll have to do the work in the other states that you're in. On the positive side, you've got a medium-sized sales force. You've got more direct contact, more attention for your brand. You're getting consolidated billbacks and paperwork. In other words, you're not dealing with, if you have a marketing company that's dealing with 10 distributors, you're not dealing with the billbacks and the paperwork from 10 distributors. You're dealing with one marketing company. Some examples of regional marketing companies: Dendor Wine Management in the Northeast, Dream Merchants is again in the Northeast, Kelnan Wines up here in the Pacific Northwest. Kelnan, they handle a number of states.
But they're like a one-type deal. They'll take health away, pay you right away, and they may not ever buy from you again.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yes, it's simply cash flow.
I asked someone for the name of a company up here in the Northwest. Ellen, can you tell me one of a regional marketing company up here? No? There aren't any, huh? Northwest Core, okay. But they're national. Okay, forming a marketing alliance with other wineries. In other words, getting together with some of your neighbors, maybe in this room, and saying, hey, look, you have wines from Ribbon Ridge, I have wines from Dundee Hills, this person, is Carlton. Maybe we should get together, pool our resources, and market our wines together, and come up with a name. That's a possibility. I'm pretty sure that somebody's done this. You can tell me if somebody has done this up here in the Pacific Northwest. But some of the liabilities are you may have an overlap. I mean, if you have 3 wineries from Dundee Hills, maybe you don't want to, market them together. Everybody's going to have a different strategy they may want to pursue, and you're going to have to coordinate that. You're going to have to account for the shared costs. So, I mean, there are some liabilities by going with a marketing alliance, even though they're people that you know. On the plus side, you're sharing the marketing costs with your friends and neighbors. These are people you know and people you trust, hopefully. You would have a shared regional sales rep. So you might have one sales rep for the Northeast that sells all 3, 5, whatever, how many wineries that you got together to represent. And that's nice. There's more focus on Oregon. It would be nice to have somebody who just represented you and a couple of other of your Oregon wineries, because that's all they're talking about. They're talking about the Oregon brand, as Tom mentioned before, as well as your own wineries. So I mean, that's something to think about. I don't know if anybody's done it or who does it here in Oregon, but it's something that I've heard that can be done and probably would work well. Okay, so you've got distributors in 15 states, and you can't pump the tanks over and wash out the barrels and manage all these distributors. So you hire somebody. You hire somebody, maybe you give them a title, VP of Sales and Marketing for the US, and they're gonna go around and manage your distributors and keep them up to date with pricing and do market visits and go to tastings and do all these things that you just can't do, because now you're at the point where you're trying to make the wine, grow the grapes, and do everything. You just can't do everything. So on the downside, you've got salary, expenses, and benefits. On the plus side, this is a person who works for you. You have total control over the message and what they do. And there's complete accountability. I mean, they report to you, and you're going to be on top of everything that's going on. You're going to know when wine's going out the door, and if it's not, why it's not. How many of you in here in the room feel this is the only way to go for you? That this is what you would want? You want somebody that's in-house? Yeah? Okay. The last one, no winery rep, just you. And there's nothing wrong with this, especially if you're under 5,000 cases. This may be where you need to be. It's just you. The downside is it's only you. It's all your time, and it's your travel away from home. On the plus side, you get total focus on your winery. You control the message and the story, and you have a powerful impact because there's no better spokesman for your winery than you. There really isn't. And I say that to people who come to the market all the time. You know, I really try and make winery owners and who come to our market feel valued, because they actually have a bigger impact, and what they say and what they do, whether it's at a tasting or out in a market work with, has more impact on the customer, and it sticks. So, I mean, it's really good. Nobody does it. Nobody that you can hire does it better than you do. Yes, question?
Do you have averages in terms of size
Go ahead.
of wineries for considering these different options, either in production level or sales level?
It's funny you should mention that. Okay, I mean, let's take a look. You have to look at a cost-benefit analysis. In other words, your costs for a dedicated winery employee are salary plus benefits, travel and entertainment, and the cost for a marketing company is about between 12 and 18% commission on the FOB. So if these are your choices, it's usually about 15%. You may have some additional costs for samples and tastings. But the difference between having an employee, whether it's you or somebody you've hired, and the cost for a marketing company, you've got to weigh these factors. And so some of the tangible factors are the size of your winery, your support staff, your time. Intangibles, do you want control over the process? Is your relationship with your distributors more important personally than having a marketing company? So take a look at, if you have a winery dedicated sales rep up here, somebody you've hired to be a sales and marketing person. I'm guessing you're going to, in the Portland area, you're going to, is that too high? That's too high? That's funny. All the marketing reps, now don't forget this person's going to be working the whole country. Okay, so this is a national sales rep. Okay, that's kind of how all the people that I deal with say they make at least that much. I guess they're bragging. No, I mean, this is as much a reflection of what people are earning in New York too. This is, if you were to hire somebody for the Northeast and they lived in New York, that's the minimum you'd be paying. Okay, so I was thinking if somebody lived out here and was traveling nationally, that you, okay, so maybe it's 65, 70? Oh, really? Flip them, huh? Benefits, I just calculated about 7% of the salary as benefits. T&E, about $3,000 a month. Total $126.95. Doesn't matter what numbers you put in here. If this number is 60, then you do the math.
That's comparable to California, and particularly now.
It's more comparable with California?
Yeah.
Okay, well, see that, you know.
It's comparable with Washington, and if you subtract about 15,000, it's common for this.
Okay. Whatever the number is, okay, if this number is smaller, this number is going to be smaller. But take a look at this. So then what you should do is take a look down the left side, distributor sales in cases. I'm looking at an average FOB of Oregon at about $165. I'm probably in the ballpark. It's not going to be right for all of you, which means your sales are going to be this for 5,000 cases, $165, $825,000 of sales. And this doesn't count what you do in direct sales. This is just where you're selling to distributors and you're paying this person to go, you're paying either a marketing company or this person to go do. There's $123,750 is what you'd pay a marketing company. Here's $126,000. Here's about where if you're doing less, it may pay you to have a marketing company in here.
We found in using marketing companies before that they still require a ton of winemaker travel and principal travel.
Well, then you need to factor that in as well. I mean, certainly, because if your winemaker's traveling, he's not making wine, you've got travel and entertainment. I mean, I know that a trip to the East Coast, a trip to New York City for somebody here from Portland is going to cost you, $1,000 in travel and entertainment plus hotels, a couple $100 a night. It can easily be for a 3-day work week, meaning 3 days you're working in the market, can cost you upwards of $1,500. Would you agree, Ellen? I mean, anybody else? Mike? 2,000 to 3,000? Okay. So what I'm getting at is when you're building a strategy, you need to look at this. You need to make your own cost-benefit analysis. This is a simple one based on factors that are very few variables. But if you have if you're planning on sending the winemaker around to Chicago or to Houston or to Florida once a year for each of those markets, then you have to figure that in as well. Okay, so the question is, where do you draw the line? How much do you want to control your message? And how much do you want to hand off the day-to-day marketing of your brand? How important it is? These are intangibles that you need to feel out, and only you can answer. How much of these things do you want to have your hands on? It's not bad to want to hand these things off to a marketing company or sales and marketing. It's not bad. I mean, they do what they do best, and you do what you do best. If you are the viticulturalist and the winemaker, maybe you just can't do it all. All right? You have to hand some of these things off, and it's not bad to say that's what I got to do. Or again, maybe you are the owner, maybe you are the vineyard manager, and maybe you want to control the whole process, and that's fine too. It's just what's important to you, and where can you make those trade-offs? Okay, this slide just reviews the marketing costs associated with wholesale distribution. Travel and entertainment, either your own or employee rep, or commission paid to a sales and marketing company. Samples, tastings, press samples, charity events. Yes, you're going to ask to do charity events even in New York or Chicago. Sometimes your distributor will ask you to participate. These are the things, these are the bullet points you need to look at when you're making your cost-benefit analysis. Yes?
Earlier we talked about regional marketers. Can you name some in New England area, in the Northeast?
Yeah, I did. Dendor Wine Management is one. He's somebody I work with. He's in like 26 states, mostly New England and a few Midwestern states. I don't know them all, and it would be a disservice if I just told, I know Dream Merchants operates in 2 states, Vintage Point in 3, not Vintage Point, Compass Wine Management in 3 states. I could give you more information if I could. I can't think of them off the top of my head. But that's certainly information you can find out by talking to, find out if any of your other neighbors have a regional marketing company. Call a distributor you know well and say, who did they deal with? So you could find that information out. Okay. What if you already have a yes?
Just on that last slide, Bill, I didn't see anything there for co-op marketing funds,
Co-op marketing funds.
where you're sharing the cost of doing an event or,
Well, that would come under tastings, all tastings.
advertising or whatever.
I would, okay, advertising, no, that you would do, essentially the winery does is on a national basis. I can't imagine you're doing, well, we don't do that in New York. We can't co-op, for instance, you're talking about like a catalog, like a spring catalog for a retailer. We're not allowed to do that in New York, so that's forbidden. So I don't know that if they do that in other states. I mean, that's a cost, yes, certainly. But you could throw that under tastings.
Well, what I was getting at, things like events, can you typically pay for those with extra wine instead of cash?
Oh, the question is, can you pay for events, pay a distributor for an event with wine instead of cash? I would say yes. My accountant would say absolutely not. Because you can't track it, it's not GAAP compliant, and he'd give me 10 other reasons. But that's why you never ask an accountant or a lawyer any question unless you expect the answer to be no. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Okay, so you have a distributor and you think you want to change. Oh, I'm sorry, yes? Question?
Yeah, just one more with the marketing costs.
Mm-hmm.
In your experience, have you seen both samples and or marketing costs worked into FOB pricing? Or is that something that a winery would put in a different category, like an overall business account?
Yes, I have. The question is, have I seen some marketing costs worked into the FOB? I do have one supplier who has a FOB price for his wine. He sells it lower and allows us to make 32% GP, but all the marketing and all the samples come out of our budget. So basically, he's giving me the difference and saying, okay, it's your money now, you manage it. So yes, you can do that. You could say, my FOB price is $100 a case, and I'll deal with 2% samples, and I'll let you bill me back for incentives and any other marketing costs. So you can say, I don't want to deal with any of that stuff. My FOB is now 90. I still want you to sell it at this price. I want you to make an extra 3 to 5% GP, but that's all coming out of your pocket. So yes, you can do that. You could negotiate that. I've only had one supplier that does that with me. As long as they don't ask for an accounting at the end of the year, because that's a nightmare. That means I've got to keep a whole nother set of books, and there's no way that I'm going to do that. He just trusts that we're spending the money and that's what's going on. Okay, so you have a distributor, and you want to change distributors. Make sure you know why. And the reason you should is because the grass isn't always greener. You may be moving to another set of problems. And there's lots of problems out there, as we've heard from distributors. Consider solving the problems with your current distributor first. Find out what the problem is. See if you can come up with a solution. You're not selling enough wine. You're selling it to the wrong places. Mostly it's you're not selling enough wine. See if you can fix those things first. If they're unfixable, take a look at, consider your brand performance in light of other markets. In other words, are your sales down in New York, but they're down in Chicago, Florida, and Arizona too? If not, if you can say, look, I used to get this all the time. They'd come into a meeting, here we are in New York, we're the #2 market. Rhode Island's beating you guys. Come on. They would say, Connecticut sells more than you do. I would get beat up with that all the time. So, I mean, if that's the fact, if the fact is, you're selling in Chicago and Iowa is selling more than Chicago, well, then maybe there's a problem with your Chicago distributor. It might be. It might very well be. So consider it in performance of other markets. Consider that the problem may exist with the winery. If everybody's doing the same thing, then maybe either your expectations are out of line, or maybe the price is wrong, or maybe the quality is wrong, or maybe the packaging needs an upgrade, something. So don't blame the distributor first. There's plenty of blame to go around, but make sure you look at this in a logical and a clear-headed way. Oh, has anybody changed distributors in the last 12 months? You have? Oh, yeah, well, of course you have. Of course you have. Yeah, I know. I mean, because there are some things you need to consider too. Is the old distributor may close out your wine. You may have bad inventory. I mean, for wineries your size, it's probably not a big deal. You have 2, 3, 5 SKUs. You're changed distributors when you're somebody like Dreyfus Ashby or Vineyard Brands, where you have 600 SKUs in multiple vintages of Burgundies, and you find out that the distributor has like 9 vintages of stuff collecting dust. It's a nightmare. I've gone through that. It's no fun. But there are, I mean, if having a distributor close out the last 30 cases of something is a problem, make sure you solve that before it becomes a problem. Say, I'll buy all the inventory back. I don't want you to sell it. I'll sell it to the distributor, whatever it is. Okay. I did a little research before I came out here to see Oregon wines distributed in New York State. Now, I mentioned before, there's over 200 distributors in New York. There's actually 230 something. I polled 131 distributors, and I got this off a website that does B2B tracking for wholesalers and to retailers. So I got a pretty good, I captured, I'd say 95% of the market. So I polled 131 distributors. There are 86 of them with Oregon wineries, 86 distributors in New York that have at least one Oregon brand in their portfolio. That represents 175 wineries. How many did you say there were, Tom? 545. 545. So, I mean, in light of that, that's less than half, but still, 175 Oregon wineries are represented in New York. I mean, I'll throw this question out to you. I doubt that you have the answer. Is there any other state other than Oregon that would have 175 Oregon wineries represented? I thought that was amazing. I thought that's a pretty good representation. Total 779 SKUs. That's unique SKUs, not multiple vintages. That's 779. So that's about, well, what's that divided by that? About 4? 4 or 5 SKUs, 4 point something SKUs per winery represented. So for those of, this is one of the things I was kind of alluding to earlier. Maybe New York isn't the first place you want to go, because New York, everybody wants to be there. Maybe especially if you don't have a lot of wine, you want to consider some of the other top 10 markets. Markets like, New Jersey, Chicago, Orlando, et cetera, before you moved to New York or Los Angeles, which is California. Although I know your proximity to California would let you think that you probably sell a lot of Oregon wine, but they've got their own wine industry, so it's probably not the fact, correct? Or is California a huge customer for any of you? It is?
It's our number 3 state.
It is. Anybody else? And you too. But for anybody else, I mean, is it by and large, they've got their own wine, they buy California wine, they're not looking for Oregon?
It's a tough sell.
It is a tough sell. That's kind of what I figured. And Ellen, you've worked in both states, for wineries in both states. And I just wanted to give you a picture of, we were talking about, this is the distributor landscape in New York. There's 2 distributors in New York that are $1 billion or more in sales. That's wine and spirits. So you can't separate out just wine. Those numbers don't exist. Distributors that are between 10 and $130 million, there's 20 of them. And most of these guys are in the Fine Wine Alliance that I was talking to you about before. Between 2 million and 9.9 million is 65 distributors. And $2 million or less, this number is mind-boggling. I mean, basically, this is one or two people operations. This is one person. There's a lot of one-person operations in New York. They may be selling a page of wines. Some of them are rather obscure, maybe, you know, like Cousins Winery from Greece, and they've got, you know, 10 products and some Arak and some other things. Or some of these are actually, I think, almost hobbies, but they still exist out there. Some of them are more than hobbies. I've had 2 salespeople who worked for me at some time in the past have their own little operations. It's just them, and they sell about $1.8, $2 million. And if they take home, you know, 15% of that or 20% of that and take their expenses out, they're making a living. You know, so it's like being a salesperson, but you've got your own business. So a lot of those do exist, though, in New York. But New York is unique in having as many distributors as they do. Yes?
In the state of New York, you're allowed to have multiple distributors?
Yes. You mean one winery could have multiple distributors? Yes, but most distributors won't go for that.
Right, because you would have to nominate one of those distributors to do the price posting.
Oh, yeah, and you can do that. And there was a long history of New York State. The question was, in New York State, can you have multiple distributors, more than one? And yes, you can, for the same winery. There was a long history in New York State of having upstate and downstate distributors. There were different companies from Prohibition up until about the 80s. And then that started to fall apart as companies started covering the whole state. There's still 1 or 2 distributors that only work upstate. Elmira Distributing, and I can't think of another one. There's another one up there. And so you could have somebody work, they call it the New York metropolitan area, which is generally Westchester County, the 5 boroughs, and Long Island, the 2 counties in Long Island, and then everything else, which is a lot of trees. I don't know if you think of New York, but we have one of the biggest wilderness parks in the world, 6.5 million acres in the Adirondacks. It's just a lot of trees and not a lot of wine sold up there. But most distributors, if you were both full state distributors, would say, if you want to go with another distributor, you know, then there's something wrong. We don't want you. We don't distribute anything else that's where the brand is also competing with us in another distributor. More questions? Yes, Ellen.
Can you talk just a minute about what the landscape is in New Jersey and Connecticut right now for fine wine sales?
Yeah, New Jersey, Connecticut, I don't know a whole lot about because I've never worked in that state. New Jersey, there are 4 major distributors that are about anywhere from 300 to 600 million. There are about a dozen that are in this, well, let's say $2 to $20 million. And then there's maybe 2 or 3 dozen smaller ones. But a lot of the distributors in New Jersey are also New York. Like the company I founded is New York and New Jersey. Polaner's New York and New Jersey. Skurnica's New York and New Jersey. Winebow's New York and New Jersey. A lot of distributors set themselves up immediately to cover both states because it's really one market. It's such an urban area, such an urban and suburbanly connected area that it's just one market. And so that's most of the distributors that are in New Jersey have a New York component to them that's much larger. Usually about 70% of the business is done in New York, 30% in New Jersey. Yes?
How important is it to have local Oregon state distribution before you go out seeking some other state?
Oh, I think it's really important for you. How important is it to have Oregon distribution before you go outside? I would think it's very important. I think you're building a local base that helps you out immensely. I don't know. I can't imagine that you wouldn't want to have your wines in Portland and other, well, you probably, okay, you're not saying not selling them, you're saying selling them through a distributor. Oh, well, in that case, the fact is you are selling them in Oregon, so, and you have the right to sell them directly. I don't know, having a distributor, it just might take, it either takes that, it goes back to these trade-offs that I listed. It either takes that job off your plate and you can do other things, or that's what you really want to do, and you're also, P.S., making an extra margin on it, so that maybe that's important for your cash flow. All those things I brought out, you know, how important is it for you for your cash flow? How important is it for you to have control of the message? How important is it for you to control the whole process? If it is, then those are questions only you can answer. Yes, Ellen?
Another strategy, though, because we have the same issue here with Portland as we had in Napa with San Francisco and the Bay Area, is everybody in the world can get in their car, throw a wine bag in their car, and hit the market. So it's very saturated.
Mm-hmm.
One other strategy that worked for us both in California and Oregon was we went outside the state, created some recognition, some pull, and then got the local guys to go, how come you haven't shown me your wine? You know, because they're hearing about it from other people or from people who visited the winery, et cetera, and you're not out there, you know, banging on doors right away, and then they start hearing about your wine.
Okay.
And then they're like, wait a minute, how come I don't have this one?
Wow, that's an interesting strategy. It's a reverse psychology.
Worked in Napa, too,
Yeah.
with San Francisco.
Yeah. Yeah, dating the boy across town instead of the kid next door. Yes?
So you get approached by a small distributorship out of state, and you go online and you don't recognize any of the products, or if you do recognize them, you don't know any of the people. How do you check up on their creditworthiness? I mean, typically, if I knew someone who had some association with them, I'd just call them up and say, hey, did they pay the bills or not? But how do you do that when you've got nothing to go?
Well, how do you check on the creditworthiness of a small distributor out of state? If you go online and look at the products he's selling, you can try calling one of those wineries and say, are you happy with this guy?
If I don't know them, then why not? You don't know the information.
They might tell you. They might tell you. I mean, if they have something good to say, they'll probably share it with you, and if they have something bad to say, they're definitely going to share it with you. Yes?
Have you seen the website No Pay Distributors?
No. What's that?
It's a fledgling underfunded site, but the concept is interesting. If you
No
ever got
Pay
some-
Distributor. So it's a website that basically is
With reviews.
tattling on. Oh, good.
Pay me.
And there's good reviews on there too. There's
Right.
good and bad reviews on that website.
Okay. Well, that's interesting because I said there's no clearinghouse, there's no Morningstar reviews. But if somebody's trying to set one up, I would be happy to hear about it.
Fledgling, but it's an interesting concept. Interesting venture.
Okay. Michael, did you have a question? Or was it?
That was it.
That was. You took his question. More questions?
I mean, you can also call local accounts that that distributor calls on to find out information about that distributor.
Maybe you won't know the credit history, but I mean,
Accountability.
yeah, you'd know if they're any good.
I have a question.
Yes.
Back to earlier, we were talking about allowances for quantity and all that. And everything, all the examples you used were of giving a bill back or a reduction in price. How's that model for you as a distributor different from me as the winery giving free goods? Like buy 10, get one.
Can you about giving free goods? Somebody asked that over here earlier.
Oh, sorry.
In other words, giving free goods versus a bill back or a credit on the account between the winery and the distributor. For me, I used to do it in the past. It's okay, but if you ask my accountant, he'll say no. He'll say absolutely not. Because, and one of the ways, here's the thing. If you're dealing with a sole proprietor, just one guy who owns the entire distributorship, he'll probably say fine, because he doesn't have to be GAAP compliant. He has no investors to answer to, is not an LLC. Most companies are not that way anymore. They're LLCs, there's multiple partnerships, or they're incorporated. And if you have to comply with generally accepted accounting principles, GAAP, you can't accept that. You can't do that because for some reason, and I don't know why, you can't be both a vendor and a customer at the same time and be GAAP compliant. Yes?
I have two questions. So what are the most successful incentive programs with your sales reps? Oh, I can't hear the back. I'm sorry, just wanted to know what the most successful incentive programs with your individual sales reps are. And then sampling in New York is pretty difficult. Like you have to have someone there in market that we've been told.
Yes.
So we've found people that can, give samples to reps.
Yes, okay, two parts to the question. What are some of the most successful incentive programs? Let me answer the second one first about sampling in New York. Technically, as a winery agent, you're not supposed to go around by yourself and sample customers and take orders. Technically, that makes you a solicitor. If you're a solicitor, you need a solicitor's permit. To get a solicitor's permit, you need to have a wholesale license. As an out-of-state representative, you don't have a wholesale license. Now, they have made an accommodation recently that if you're a winery and you have a distributor, you can come to the market. I think you have to fill out a form, but you can come to the market. There's like 3 times a year or 5 times a year and act as a solicitor, as long as you don't take orders. You can go around, you can sample people. You have to have sample not for sale stickers on. But, I mean, they're adhering to the letter of the law, and their logic is if you do something illegal, they can't get their hands on you because A, you don't live there, and B, they have nothing over you. But if one of my salespeople does something illegal, they have a solicitor's permit under my umbrella as a wholesale permit, and they can slap me with a fine. So they can't do anything to you. So that's why the purpose of that law is. We explain to them that that may be the purpose of the law, but the whole world is breaking it because this is the reality of what people do. Wineries from all over the world come to New York, they go around, they tell the story, they show the soil, they show pictures, they taste the wine. It happens every day. You can't stop this practice. You turn the entire industry upside down. So let's find a way to accommodate it. So they said, well, how often does this happen? Well, like a couple times a year. For each person? Well, maybe, sometimes maybe once a year, sometimes maybe not. And so it's kind of vague, but nobody that I know is caught because they came more than 3 times to the market and sampled wine. The other part of your question was, what are some of the most successful incentive programs we've run? That's big. That's a whole nother class. I actually, in part of my leadership training for distributors, go over all kinds of incentive programs. More than just incentive programs, I talk about putting incentive money where you want your business to go. So make sure you're incentivizing the things that are important to the company. Generally, money trumps all other incentives. So dollars in a salesman's pocket is what they look at. I always make incentives both graduated and it's never all or nothing. I found that salespeople, if you run all or nothing incentives and they get halfway there and they see that they're not going to make it, they just stop entirely. So I usually give somebody an incentive for hitting 80% of their goal, 90% of their goal, and 100%, and it's graduated. So you get a little bit for 80%, a little bit more for 90%, and you get the big jackpot when you hit 100% of your goal. I will say that, trips, here's the way it works. For young salespeople, in other words, people just starting off, they're eager to learn, trips to the winery and trips to wine regions are great incentives. Generally, they're single, they don't have kids, they want to learn about wine regions, they want to travel. Take that same salesperson 20 years later, he's got kids, soccer, a mortgage, he's been to the wine regions already, and you're offering him another trip where he's going to spend 5 days running from winery to winery, tasting wines and doing what he does for a living. He's not working on it. He wants the trip to Bermuda with his wife so he can leave the kids at home. It matters who you're targeting, who is your target audience. It really does. I'm trying to think of some of the more successful programs. I also generally tend to run programs that group wines together, either by a category, say all Oregon wines, or if there's certain things I want to do. If we want placements, you run a placement incentive. And one of the things you have to understand is when you're selling wine and you're incentivizing by the case, $5 a case, if the salesman's going to sell 50 cases in a month, well, that's 5 times to $250, right? But if you're looking for placements, you can't offer 10 or 15 or even $20 a placement, because if they're going to get 3 new placements in a month, if it's less than $100, they're probably not looking at it. But what you have to understand is that a placement is worth 10 times what a one-case sale is. Because if you get a placement, it's on the wine list, they're going to be reorders. So we tend to incentivize placements at $50 and $100 per placement, if it's a qualified placement.
Is that you or the winery?
Sometimes we do both. Yeah, I partner with wineries on certain incentives. The way I set up my company and the way I did before, where I used to work, we paid some of the highest commissions in the industry, but instead of paying 7% straight commission, we pay 6% commission, and we take 1% of sales, and we put it into a fund where we use that as structured incentive programs. So you can earn the extra 1%, but you got to earn it, and you got to earn it on the things that are important to the distributor, which are ostensibly should be important to you. Somebody else had a question back here. No? Yes?
Just about funding incentives, if it's a supplier thing, or
We usually split it. I mean, sometimes the supplier will come in and say, I have, you know, it's usually bigger suppliers that are with major marketing companies. I've got $10 a case to spend. How are we going to do it? But you know, most people in this room are not going to come to me and say that. They're going to, you know, they're going to dodge the call when I want money from you. But that, well, that's not necessarily true. But I always will split incentives with suppliers. I think it's the fair thing to do. Yes.
So then how does small companies like ourselves compete with these larger companies that can offer these better incentives?
Hopefully, you're not competing on the same brands. I mean, that is a problem of how much attention you get in the winery, because the bigger brands with the marketing companies that have marketing budgets are going to outspend you. You can be more clever. You can do other kinds of incentives. So, I mean, for wines of the caliber you're selling, incentives aren't necessarily the be-all and end-all. It really isn't. Other kinds of things, spending your money on working the market, on doing tastings with sommeliers, on getting your brand out there visibly in the national press, those kinds of things are probably more effective. Yes?
Can you clarify that $50 to $100 incentive for placement is by the glass?
No, not necessarily. It should be a restaurant. We always pay more for a restaurant placement. By the glass is hard. It's hard to say. Is the restaurant really doing it by the glass? I mean, you'd have to go check. And actually, if they're doing it by the glass, that means they may buy those 3 cases and move on to something else. So that may not be what you want to pay a $50 placement for. If it's on the list, it may last for a year or 2, and that's kind of what you want. Yes?
Just by the glass, just say a minimum 3 months, and then that way you know you're getting longevity of that glass placement versus it being switched out and the salesperson learning that I can get an incentive by hitting this, and then
Yeah.
I'm going to swap it out and swap that.
I would argue that tracking that's a nightmare, and I hate, you know, I don't want to have to do, I'll track anything that my computer will tell me. If I've got to leave the building and go take a picture of something, forget it. I don't want to, because there's too many people, too many variables. It's too easy to cheat, and it's too hard to track. Yes?
Maybe just pull back a little bit. We're getting more micro into specific things, but I find in our case, you know, I feel like most salespeople aren't making their living selling like $50 bottle of Pinot Noir, and I recognize that as kind of a liability of ours going in the marketplace. What's the best way for us to successfully work with the distributor so we maintain a reasonable share of mind that we're not selling wines only during days when we're doing work, whereas that wine is going to get showed, it's going to get love and attention. How can we best work with the distributor to make sure that that's productive for both sides?
Social media, of which I know very little, given my gray hair and age. But I understand it works really well when directed at both customers and salespeople. That communication back and forth between the winery, just sending notes out from the winery, believe it or not, directly to a salesperson can, like, oh wow, I got an email from Winderly, you know, and that points out some aspect of your product that's new, unique, different. Contacting a customer directly. If you have a couple of especially prominent Chicago restaurants or New York City restaurants, you going directly to them and then copying the salesperson back and saying, look, I talked to so-and-so at Per Se in New York, and he said he would consider carrying our wine because they carry it at the French Laundry, but he wants a presentation. Would you go make a presentation? Just getting involved with salespeople like that is, especially on a brand, like you said, $50 bottle of wine, that's important because that's real hand selling, and that's very, it requires a lot of attention on the part of the salesperson. Yes?
Would being on quota or some type of featured go-to-market work for that price point?
Not likely. I wouldn't do it with a brand like that. I would do something else. Do something else entirely. Okay. Well, that's the end of my presentation. I hope you learned some things, and I don't know what Tom has in store for if you have follow-up questions or if you want the information that's in this presentation, how we'll get it to you, but we'll figure out a way to do it if that's what everybody wants. If you all just want to run out of here and have a beer and forget about it, that's fine. Okay.